Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for our webinar on collaborating with law enforcement. My name is Laura Cook. I'm the director of the Financial Crime Resource Center. It's a program of the National Center for Victims of Crime. For anyone, if you've got any tech issues, there's a little Q&A box. There should be a Q&A box in the bottom right corner of your screen where you can send us a message and we can see if we can help you down there. But hopefully everyone's hearing okay. So today's webinar is brought to you through our collaboration with the Identity Theft Resource Center on a project called NITDAN, which is the National Identity Theft Victim Assistance Network. Through the NITDAN project, we are providing technical support to a number of selected identity theft coalitions throughout the United States. Our presenters today are Randy Lawrence and Kristen Judge. I'll give them a quick introduction. Randy is currently retired after serving 30 years in law enforcement. He was a commander in the San Diego County District Attorney's Office, Chief of Humane Law Enforcement for the San Diego Humane Society, and most recently was a lieutenant at San Diego State University. Randy is a cybercrime expert, a trained computer forensic examiner. Specializing in identity theft, Randy has published many magazine articles and has taught courses on identity theft. Randy worked with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, a national network of law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies pursuing cases involving child abuse and exploitation via the Internet. Prior to this, he worked on CATCH, Computer and Technology Crime High-Tech Response Team, a task force which was a multi-agency effort dedicated to investigating Internet crimes and advanced technology. Randy currently serves on the advisory committee for NITDAN, the National Identity Theft Victim Assistance Network, and is a part of the Speakers Bureau for the Identity Theft Resource Center located in San Diego. We also have with us today Kristen Judge. To address the needs of cybercrime victims, Kristen founded the nonprofit Cybercrime Support Network and works with federal, state, and local law enforcement, as well as consumer protection agencies to help consumers and small businesses affected by cybercrime. While serving as a county elected official, Kristen supported the U.S. Department of Homeland Security in growing cybersecurity outreach to state and local government officials. After being elected into office, she worked at the Center for Internet Security and the National Cybersecurity Alliance, NCSA. Kristen worked with Google, federal agencies, congressional leaders, and other key stakeholders across the country to educate consumers and businesses. As a thought leader, Kristen has been seen on C-SPAN, local news outlets, and has been called upon by technology publications like SC Magazine and Government Technology to share best practices for online safety. She's been named an SC Media Women in IT Security Influencer and is a national speaker sharing cybersecurity best practices with elected officials, businesses, and consumers. Her first LinkedIn Learning course, called Cybersecurity for Small and Medium Businesses, Essential Training, teaches cybersecurity to small businesses based on NIST cybersecurity framework. Many thanks to Randy and Kristen for being here with us today and sharing their expertise. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Randy.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. And again, this is going to be about collaborating with law enforcement. The topics we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about knowing your audience, what law enforcement agency you're trying to reach out to. We're going to talk a little bit about understanding how the department operates, and in reality, who should you be talking to in that agency. And they're also going to talk a little bit about how to effectively convey your message to law enforcement. So right off the bat, obviously, I'm a retired law enforcement officer, and I know many of you probably know there are stereotypes out there about us. You know, we have attitudes, or maybe we're kind of hardened because of the jobs we do, and maybe a little skeptical. Well, some of those are obviously true. I have to say I've been lied to just several times after 30 years in law enforcement, so I have to say I'm a little skeptical sometimes about things. But what I will say, too, is this. All of you are out there to do a job and to help law enforcement. And coming from law enforcement, there was nothing better for me was when someone came to me with help. And every one of you have your strengths, and you are actually providing help to law enforcement. And that's something that we were dire straits. We needed help because we get overwhelmed on things. So, yeah, even though there's those stereotypes out there, don't sweat that part of it because you're there to help, and that's the important part of this. So what we're going to cover a little bit today is who do you want to get your message to? As a nonprofit, there's many different areas of the department that you could be reaching out to. There could be dispatch, the people that are actually speaking to the callers when they're calling in to complain about whether it be identity theft, cybercrime, whatever the topic is. So that's one aspect. There's the patrol officers, because they're the ones that are actually going out and making the contact with the citizens when they're sent on the calls. Detectives are in a unique situation because obviously they're investigating these crimes if it reaches their threshold. They're actually investigating it, and being a detective for over 20 years, I loved having help from people because the victims will be calling on a regular basis wanting to know what's going on with their case or what should I do next, all these different questions. And that's where I believe a lot of you can step in and help, because you can answer those questions and allow the detective strictly to do his job while you're helping the victims in these cases. The other group that you can help with or reach out to is a community outreach or the personnel from the department, because many departments have these civilians that go out and do public safety fairs and things like that. And they're also a great group to be in touch with. And we'll talk about them more a little bit later in the presentation. So the first thing I wanted to touch base with is having to do your homework. Every one of you probably are in a jurisdiction where you have several different agencies, and you need to know who they are and what are they up to, meaning this. The first thing is the size of the agency. There's many small departments out there. I've worked for a department as small as 20 officers. I've also worked for an agency that was over 7,000 with the LA County Sheriff's Department. And the issue there for you is to understand that when, depending on the size of the department, it makes a big difference as to how you go about making contact. Because some agencies, the smaller agencies, everybody's located in one building. Your dispatch center, your patrol, even your detective bureau, your community outreach, everybody's in one building. So you only have one place to go to talk to people. Meanwhile, you have a place like, say, LA County or here in San Diego PD or San Diego County Sheriff, they have numerous substations. And in fact, their dispatch center is located in a totally different building. So if you want to educate the dispatchers on what you can do, you're going to have to go to a totally different location than where the patrol is. And detective bureaus on the larger departments are located in their own buildings. We're going to talk later on, too, about task force, things like that. So there may be many locations that you're going to have to make contact with in order to get the word out there, what you can, the service you're providing to the victims and also due to the departments. So we're going to go through each one of these to make sure everyone understands, and hopefully you'll be able to better understand about the different departments and who to try to contact for these different areas. Just some basic information, too, to start off with, though. I put up there access gained how, because it's not like you're walking into a normal business. And so you have to obviously figure out how are you getting in. Is there a telephone out front of the building that you can access, call into the dispatch center, or whether there's a watch commander line that in order for you to get access. I know of people that have showed up at like 6 o'clock in the morning to go to a briefing and had no idea how to get inside. And then the problem with that is they call their contact, and their contact is, say, an admin personnel that only works 9 to 5. So there they are standing outside of a police station, knocking on the doors, trying to get somebody to realize that they're standing there waiting to get in. When you talk to your contact, how much time do you really have? Because most briefings for patrol and dispatch are very limited. Usually they may have maybe 15 minutes. So if you're coming in to present and talk about your organization, they literally may only give you 2 or 3 minutes. And the problem with that, too, is this. If you're doing all 3 shifts we're going to talk about in a minute, every shift is going to have a different watch sergeant or watch commander depending upon how large the agency is. And unfortunately, every one of those watch sergeants and watch commanders are going to have their own personalities. Some of them will welcome you in and say, come on in, and they may say, take all the time you want. If we get calls, they respond from the station. There may be other watch commanders or watch sergeants you deal with, but they're going to tell you, you got 2 minutes. Make it short. So you kind of have to learn how to just deal with the individual personality, because you're going to see a lot of different personalities out there. You obviously want to find out how many people are attending this briefing. Is it 5, 10, 20? Because you need to know how much material to bring with you. And you want to clarify, is it strictly patrol officers you're talking to, or in the smaller agency, is it officers and dispatchers? Are detectives in this briefing, or do they have their own briefing? Same thing with the community outreach, with the non-sworn volunteer or volunteers of the non-sworn. Are they in the briefing? So you want to know who you're talking to. I put down too, PowerPoint versus a talk. Most of the time, most of these agencies are not going to give you time to do a PowerPoint. They just don't have the time unless you set up a time specifically for your presentation where they say you've got 15 minutes. Then you might be able to set up a PowerPoint. But most of the time, you're going to have to go in there and make a sell to these people very quickly. And you want to be able to be prepared to hit the high points, and we'll talk a little bit later about what kind of information is always good to put in these talks, because it'll get the officers and dispatchers definitely to open their ears. I put down, like I said, materials to bring just to make sure you have enough material to pass out to everybody there, and also obviously to leave behind. So dispatch. Obviously, dispatch is a group of personnel who take the calls, and you want to make sure that you reach out to them, because they're the first contact with the public. They're going to be the ones that I think need to know about you, because there's going to be many times when dispatchers tell the citizens and the victims that this crime didn't reach their threshold, so therefore they're not going to be sending a police officer out to investigate or even take a report possibly. But if they have your information, you're going to be able to hopefully get that dispatcher say, oh, you know what, though, here's someone that can help. And so it's great to be able to have that information at dispatch. Some dispatch centers, there's actually a lieutenant or a commander, so sworn personnel is there, and that's who you contact. Other departments, though, they have non-sworn, they're dispatch managers. So you just want to be able to try to verify who you're dealing with and things like that. Now, I know you are all involved in nonprofits, and I put down the briefing times, and this applies obviously for dispatch and patrol, and I said, yes, attend all of them. Unfortunately, no, you're not going to be able to attend a briefing at 9 o'clock in the morning and talk for 5 minutes and be done, because in reality, briefings are going to normally be at 6 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and 10 o'clock at night. How you schedule that time, though, to me is very important. I know people out there that have scheduled briefings, and they schedule them all 3 on the same day. The problem with that is you get up at 5 and do one at 6. By 10 o'clock that night, you're toast. And you want to make sure you're bringing your best picture and enthusiasm to these briefings. So I recommend probably breaking it up. The other thing you have to remember, too, is you're not going to hit everybody on one briefing, because some people are on days off. And depending on the department, some have specific shifts. So there's Group A that works Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Group B works Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and they rotate Wednesdays. So if that's the case, you're going to have to do briefings at the beginning of the week and the end of the week, because you want to make sure you're getting the word out to everybody, everyone that works in that department, not just one shift or the other. So you need to spread out your time, and you need to allot that amount of time. When it comes to dispatch, like I said, they're the ones that are making the first contact with public. The victims are calling them. They're going to be upset and things like that. Many of them take hundreds of calls a day. And that's why whatever you can give them to help them so they can refer people to your organization, to me, is wonderful. And the same thing applies with patrol officers, too. When it comes to dispatch, like I said, you need to verify location. Is it a dispatch center, so they're all by themselves? Or do they brief with patrol? Some departments that are smaller, they all brief together all at the same time, so you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone there. You can actually do dispatch and patrol at the same time. Patrol, same thing. Many of these things, watch commander versus patrol operations. I put that down because of this. Usually every shift is going to have its own watch commander. It could be a sergeant, it could be a lieutenant. There's also going to be someone over patrol operation. It could be a commander, it could be a captain, and depending upon how you deal with it, you probably are going to want to reach out to that patrol operations or that patrol captain initially, Because if you can sit down and talk with that person and let them know what you can do for their department and what you can do for the citizens of that city, they're going to say, I like you, I want you, and they're going to let the watch sergeants and watch commanders know that you're authorized to come in there and to do your presentations. If you talk to each individual watch commander or watch sergeant, whether it be a sergeant or lieutenant, the issue there is one may say, oh, I like this. The next guy may say, I'm too busy, I can't even listen to you. So you want to put across the same presentation to everyone. So that's why, to me, it's better to go after that patrol operations, whether it be a captain commander first, so they can let the watch commanders know that this is information that's important for patrol and dispatch if they're there, and you go from there. Again, you're going to attend all 3 briefings, all 3 shifts, and like I said, it's going to be the beginning of the week and the end of the week, because you want to make sure that everybody's getting the same information. Again, with patrol, the location and substations, you may be lucky and just have 1 station you have to go to, or larger agencies, you may have anywhere from maybe 2 or 3 substations up to maybe 10 or 15 substations, just depending on the size of the department. This is where, too, I say their job. Obviously, they're responding to the calls, and they're getting the radio calls to go out and talk to this victim of identity theft or cybercrime. The information you can provide to them, to me, is so important, because as a patrol officer, if I'm not able to really assist a citizen, the thing that always drove me crazy was when I was not able to really help everybody that called. And unfortunately, with the number of calls, we weren't. And the more information, the more referrals I had in my pocket, I appreciated it. So that's where, when you talk to the patrol officers, that's where you really want to let them know, this is what you can do for them, this is what we do with the victims, and please refer these people to us. So I think put that message across to patrol is so, so important. When it comes to detectives, the Detective Bureau, again, you're going to be reaching out to the lieutenant or the sergeant of the Detective Bureau. And this is where, again, every agency is different. Because some departments, they have general detectives, they have maybe 4 or 5 detectives, and they work all types of crimes. So you're going to want to talk to every one of those detectives and get your message across to them. Usually in the larger agencies, they split it up. So you may have someone does crimes of violence, someone is doing burglary. Nowadays, most agencies train their burglary detectives on ID theft and cybercrime, but you need to verify who is really doing the identity theft and cybercrimes for this agency, because it could be very different in every agency. It could be a specialty where all they do is cybercrimes and identity theft, or it could be a burglary detective that's actually doing all types of crimes. From our standpoint, I think it's great that they have specialties, because obviously if someone really knows identity theft and cybercrimes, then having your information is very vital to them. I think that's great. Someone doing, say, burglaries and they also do ID theft, that can be tough because they're doing a lot of cases usually then. You have to find out, too, is the Detective Bureau doing their own briefing, or are they going to the briefing of patrol? Many agencies require their detectives to go to the patrol briefing once or twice a week just to maintain a camaraderie with patrol. But not all detectives will usually do that. So if you go to a briefing in patrol, you may see a detective, or maybe 2, but you're not hitting the whole bureau. So you really have to find out and determine in this agency, when do the detectives brief that I need to talk to, that I'm reaching out to. Like I said, who investigates the ID theft and cyber crimes? And how can you help this detective? Like I already said, to me, having referrals in the office was fantastic, because when you're dealing with the cases, when I worked identity theft, I may have had 20 to 30 cases open at one time. And when I'm getting constantly called by the victims wanting to know what's going on, it's hard. But it's a great tool that when I was able to refer them out to, whether it be the ID Theft Resource Center or wherever, whatever organization is in your area that can help, because they can help walk the victim through the process, and as a detective, that freed me up to do what I had to do on my cases. So I have truly appreciated the groups that are out there, the nonprofits that were able to help the victims while I was doing the investigations. Next question is task forces. Here in San Diego, we actually have what we call a high-tech crime task force. Now, 10, 15 years ago, when cybercrimes and identity theft, high-tech crime was newer, that task force was staffed with about 25 investigators from across the county, and in fact, that particular task force was actually ran by the district attorney's office, but they had local police officers, state agents, and federal agents on that task force. Now, most agencies are beginning to train all their personnel on cybercrimes, though, so now that high-tech crime task force still exists, but they only have about 5 investigators. And instead of doing the true investigations, they're doing more of just the computer forensics and helping on that end of it. So they've stepped away from doing the actual investigation a lot. So what you have to do, though, is get out there and figure out, is there a task force in your area or in your state even? Because our task force in San Diego actually handled 2 separate counties. So we had agents from 2 different counties, like I said, the state and the feds on this task force. So you need to find out where they're located, and then also you need to find out who runs that task force, which is the agency I'd have to make contact with. As I stated before, our task force was ran actually by the DA's office. So we had a commander from the district attorney's office that was the oversight for the whole task force. So if anybody wanted to present to us at that task force, they had to go through that person. So it's a matter of just asking questions and determining who is really in charge of that task force so that you know that. I know the federal feds, the FBI, I know have task force all over also nowadays. So it's a matter of just asking the right questions in order to get to the right contact and in order to get in front of them. The community outreach or the crime prevention units, these usually are going to be staffed a lot of times by civilians, but the oversight is usually going to be a sworn officer. The thing that's great about the community outreach and crime prevention units that I always enjoyed was they're actually reaching out to the community. So they usually are the ones that are going out and making contact at fairs and different things like that, and we're actually going to talk about that in a minute, safety fairs and events too. But they're a great group of people to also get the information out to. Now, with them, whether or not they're going to attend a briefing, it's hard to say. They may not, depending on what their hours are, and they may do special events or talks in the evening, so they very well may not be at a briefing for patrol and detectives. They may not attend a briefing like that. So you need to find out through the agency, though, who's their supervisor, and then when can you meet with them? Because, like I said, their schedules usually are a little bit, they're not set, because they, like I said, they do fairs on the weekends or they might have presentations in the evenings, so they're a little bit more flexible. But they're a group that you definitely want to be able to reach out to also, and it's a matter of just there, again, talking to the agency to find out if they have people around that does that kind of job for you. And speaking of safety fairs and events, now most departments nowadays, they usually always have safety fairs. They could be preparedness fairs, emergency preparedness fairs, community outreach. These fairs, though, are a wonderful opportunity for you, for the nonprofits. A lot of these fairs, they're free of charge for you as a nonprofit. I know people in the business that attend these fairs on a regular basis. It's a great way to create a relationship with the department. You get to see their community outreach people. Usually there's going to be, at these community events, there's usually going to be lieutenant commanders, maybe even the police chief at these, because it's a great public outreach. So they're very important, I think, to try to find out what the schedule is of these and to find out if you're able to attend. Usually, like I said, they're free for nonprofits, but you want to verify that because sometimes they may want some kind of a fee, or maybe they want you to just simply maybe provide some snacks, drinks, things like that for the event. I do caution you, though, I put down here advertise event and how well is it attended. Just depend on how you do your job. Some of these events are heavily advertised, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of people attend these fairs. I've also attended fairs where for some reason, the word just didn't get out there like it should have, and you only end up with like 10 or 15 people that attend the presentation or at this fair for all morning. So that might be a 4 or 5 hour event, and if you only are seeing 10 or 15 people, I don't know, you have to make that determination as to whether that is good for your time. And like I said, the relationship is so important. With all these departments, you want to be able to create a relationship. I know when Kristen talks in a little bit, I think she's going to talk to you a little bit about that part of it because it is tremendous. Being able to know who people are, knowing their names, and just meeting them. And even if you aren't presenting to like a briefing, I would recommend you still meet them for a cup of coffee or something because you want to keep that relationship built up with the department and with the officers, because the one thing too about police departments, they're always changing. People are getting promoted, people get moved to new jobs, and things like that. And so when that happens, one person you may have been talking to for the last couple of years is now in a different position, and they're not your contact. But if you have a good relationship built with that individual, they're going to pass on your information, they're going to let their replacement know. And also, if they get promoted to a higher level, obviously, now they really know you, and they know your value to that department, and they're going to make sure that the department continues that relationship with you. So creating that relationship is fantastic. You want to keep that going at all times. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about your presentation. Like I said, short and simple. You may only have 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, depending on what that watch commander gives you. So you want to make sure that when you go in, you're prepared for that time allotment. The other thing that happens with these presentations during patrol briefings, obviously if they get a priority call, everyone jumps up out of briefing and they run out of the building. And if that's the case, obviously you didn't get your message across, so you're going to have to reschedule that briefing. So you want to, like I said, you do want to keep it short and simple. And what it all comes down to me, being on the receiving end of this, is like I've stated in the past in the presentation. It's what can my organization as a nonprofit do to help law enforcement? How does my organization make their job easier? And like I said, in patrol detectives and dispatch, it all comes down to the fact that the victims and the citizens of their city and county are able to call you, and you're going to help them walk through the process to help clear up this issue that they have. And from a police department, as I stated before, our goal is to help people, but we're not able to help everyone. Whereas when the people that fall through the cracks that I'm not able to help, if you're there and you're able to help pick those people up and make them whole, that's awesome. And for as law enforcement, that's something that I see as a huge benefit to any nonprofit dealing with this topic. Is those are the type of things that you really want to talk about and make sure that the agency knows about. And yeah, I think I've gone over the other parts of that. The other thing that I would say too is this, is law enforcement, we got trained constantly, including in briefings. They have what they call roll call briefing. So we were sitting through training at briefing on a regular basis. I mean, usually once a week you're going through some kind of refresher course, whether it be domestic violence, sexual harassment, firearms, use of force, just a myriad of topics that law enforcement have to get trained on all the time. And so what makes it that important to you is you have to remember that, because you want to make sure that you're enthusiastic and that your little short presentation is exciting and that you hold their attention the best you can. So you do. You really want to be animated. You want to be excited. to let them know that you really have a great product, your organization does great things, and so you want to let them know that. And I know sometimes it may be hard at 6 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock at night to be excited, but you want to make sure that those officers and dispatchers, detectives, whoever you're speaking to, realize what a great product you have and how you can help them so well. Obviously, you want to make sure that they know, too, that you really do appreciate the job they do. And you realize that they do get overwhelmed, they're so busy, and that's why you're there. You're there to help them, and you're there to make sure that the victims and the citizens of their town are able to be made whole. Some additional ideas for you to think of, too, when it comes to getting the word out there about your organizations. Police associations. Most states, I know in California, we have a statewide police officer association, and they have chapter meetings. So they have chapter meetings here in San Diego. They have them up in Riverside, LA County, all over the state. As a nonprofit, you are usually more than welcome to come to those meetings. And you can look at your organized association's websites and usually talk to the presidents and get an idea who you can contact to get into that meeting. I know people that are involved with all types of, say, insurance products that deal with police officers, financial representatives. They all attend these police officer association meetings, and in these meetings, they actually allow them to update these representatives at these meetings about their products. And what's great about that is, so you're going to have the association representative from maybe 10, 15, 20 different agencies at these meetings. So when you do that, you're going to be able to get the word out to these agencies what your organization is all about. And the fact that you want to come to their agencies and give an individual presentation to their people. So it's a great opportunity for you to meet many people from different agencies and then gain many meetings from that association meeting. So I would highly recommend you do a little research on the associations in your area to ensure that you get into them, get into those groups too. Another idea out there is the conferences. There's going to be, usually in any area, you're going to have numerous conferences, whether it be based on patrol operations for law enforcement, it could be specific to dispatchers, and then there's also investigation conferences out there. There's every type of investigation, so burglaries, there's high-tech crime investigations at those associations. They're all over, and they do these conferences on a regular basis. So they're another great way to get and talk to officers from numerous agencies within your county or state. Now, some of these conferences, I have to say, though, if you're going to go to those conferences, now, if you're nonprofit, they might allow you to come in for free, or they might charge you a very nominal fee. But that's obviously up to the association that's sponsoring that conference. So you want to make sure you verify with them whether or not there's going to be a cost on that. I know sometimes, like I said, sometimes they'll just say, hey, just bring some snacks in and drinks for people, and they're happy with that. So it just all depends what's around. Conferences, too, another thing that, believe it or not, that law enforcement does a lot of is golf tournaments. There's a lot of charity golf tournaments out there for law enforcement. And that's another place that I see vendors set up at that do nonprofit, that do, like I said, the insurance game, the financial industry. They all go to these golf tournaments just in order to create that relationship and that people see them. And a lot of the times for those, there's not real, there may be, I don't think there's charges usually, because usually they bring, like I said, bring the snacks and stuff, so it's awesome. So you can think about that too as golf tournaments. And plus, it's not a bad day when you can sit out on a beautiful golf course, hopefully for a couple hours before they tee off, and just talk and get to know people. So don't think about those too. Obviously, another idea for you is the victim service divisions of your DA and prosecutor's office. When I was in the DA's office, obviously we had the victim assistance program. Now they're there to deal with a lot not with walking people through as much as they're there, what, to teach them about the justice system, to walk them through the process on that end of it. Also, there's a victim assistance fund, at least in the state of California, so they're eligible for possibly some funds. So that's their end of it. Obviously, as a nonprofit working their way through ID theft and cybercrime, that's not what they do. That's your specialty. So I would make sure, too, that you reach out to your DA's office, your county prosecutor's office, and get to know who their victim services divisions are. Because usually part of their job, right, and I know the job description for us in San Diego County, part of their job description is actually to give victim referrals to community resources. So that's you. So it's important to make sure you know who those are, and then make sure that your organization is one of those community resources that they're providing to the victims. So take a look at that part of it. Like I said, make sure they know who you are so that they can provide your referrals to those victims. So that's my end of this. So with that, I have my contact information. I know Kristen is going to be talking about her end of it for a few minutes, and then after that, I know we're going to be hopefully have some time for questions and answers. So thank you so much, and I'm going to pass it over to Kristen at this point.
Thank you, Randy. I really appreciate the chance to be here. Thank you to the NITVAN Coalition, ITRC, and the National Center for Victims on Crime. I think these are really fantastic webinars to help give practical advice. And what I'm going to do today is just tell you a little bit of experience that I've had in working with law enforcement over the years. I am coming from the Cybercrime Support Network. We are working to ensure that cybercrime victims, those are people who are affected by victimization online or social media, and we know that that cybercrime group of victims is growing. Identity theft is certainly one of those that can be perpetrated through online devices. So we're thrilled to be working with the folks on the phone. Randy, if you can just go to the next slide. I just have one more slide, and we'll talk through that. Well, we work with federal, state, and local law enforcement. So that includes folks at the FBI, and then state police, county sheriff's offices, chiefs of police, because there is no current jurisdictional mapping that tells law enforcement, whether it be federal, state, or local, really where a crime victim should go for some of the types of cybercrime that we're talking about. For example, if someone falls victim to a romance scam, where do they start? If they lost $50, $1,000, $10,000, will the local law enforcement actually take a call? Does the FBI want to call? These are questions that aren't really answered yet. So I had to bring together federal, state, and local law enforcement in one place to have them all work together on a coordinated response. So one of the things that we created in our guiding principles for our nonprofit from the very beginning, one of our guiding principles is to respect existing protocols. One of the things I think that has been successful for us is we've never walked into a law enforcement agency, regardless of what level, and said, here's the way things need to be done. You walk into any law enforcement agency and you say, how do these things work for you and how could I help? To Randy's point, it's all about showing that you have something to offer to help them do their jobs better. These are public servants who've gone into law enforcement because they care about their community and want to make a difference. So how can you help them make a difference? So don't assume that you're going to go into any law enforcement agency and say, here's the way things should be done. So I always start up by saying, I'm here to help. What are some existing protocols that you have that you would like us to work within to make sure that it's successful here? If you're working on national programs, be careful not to assume that from one state to another or one county to another that the protocols are the same. So it's really important to have those personal relationships and establish some existing protocols that work with that law enforcement agency when you do go in to offer some help. In our program, we know that 911 dispatchers are getting calls that they need to turn away because they are not equipped to take the calls, and also the calls shouldn't be going to an emergency center. For example, if someone is a victim of ransomware or their Facebook isn't working, there actually was a call that went to 911 in the LA County Sheriff's Office because someone's Facebook wasn't working. I know that can be traumatic for some people, but it's not a 911 call. But that's just a small example of the fact that lots of victims are calling 911. And so what we do when we approach law enforcement agencies is say, we want to help take those calls away that are not supposed to be going into a dispatch center. So have a really good value-added proposition that says, here's what we can do to help, and be really specific. Because to Randy's point, these are very busy people, and they have a lot of work to do, and they're very stressful jobs. And if you're going to bring in something additional, make sure you let them know here's the benefit to them, and make it clear and concise. I also try not to do cold calls into these offices if I can help it. Once you get some good law enforcement contacts that you're working with, for example, I work with the Michigan State Police. So I've had them help introduce me to other state police agencies that are similar. Or if you work with one sheriff's office, ask them to introduce you to the county sheriff next door, for example. So you're not coming in as a cold call or an email that might even go into spam because you've never talked to that person before. They get calls from a lot of people and are being called on to serve all the time. So if you can come in through someone that knows the person you're trying to reach, you're going to have a better chance of actually getting that meeting. But again, be really concise about what the mutual benefit is and make sure they know that you're going to be working within their existing protocols. Because we work with federal, state, and local law enforcement at our organization, and I spent my time in the beginning of my cyber career as a county commissioner, I understand that it's good to have a trusted third party when you want to bring together what seem to be sometimes competing law enforcement agencies. So if, for example, a program starts at the federal level, sometimes the states may be a little bit more wary about coming on board. If something starts at the state level, sometimes the local may not want to come on board. But if you come in as a trusted third party, I think it's been helpful for us to say, we'll take the lead and everyone comes in on equal footing. And I think that's been very helpful to us. And then beware of their time. I think Randy touched on this a little bit too. You need to make sure that you understand what these folks do on a daily basis, and they're dealing with some very difficult issues and our safety, and they're in public service. So I've had my most effective calls or meetings when I came in with an agenda. I said, here's the 3 things we want to take care of today. And if you're not the right person to talk to, please then at the end of the meeting, you can tell me where to go. But be really structured in what your ask is and be cognizant of people's time and try and be as clear and concise as you can. And that's some examples and lessons learned from our experiences at CSN, and I'll stay on for questions also with Randy. Thank you again, everybody, for the opportunity.
Yeah, as a follow-up to Kristen, I would say, too, she had a great point about the relationship between the federal, state, and the local, because even though we're all in the same business, there can definitely be some egos involved and who's going to really be in charge or who's going to be the lead, things like that. So sometimes you do have to feel your way through that to figure out who you really need to talk to and to understand that. And what Kristen said about respecting the existing protocols, I think that's a great point, because you do want to understand how, because sometimes certain agencies play well together, but then sometimes some agencies don't. So those are just like things you need to get into, and when you start talking to law enforcement, I think you'll begin to understand a little bit about who does play well here, what agencies work well together, which ones are at odds right now, things like that.
Randy, can I just jump in real quick? So I want to, you brought up something else that made me remember. I do come from a political background and being a county commissioner and elected official. And it's important, too, if you're working with sheriffs or chiefs of police or county executives that support law enforcement or anyone that is in elected office, understand when their next election is and what their key points are when they are running for election. If there's a law enforcement person running for election and one of their main topics in their campaign is something that's important to you, what I've done is offered them, I can give you a good story to show, it's not a story because it's actually happening, to show that you are making a difference in something that's important to you. So it's okay to go look back at their campaign literature and say, you know, what were something that they ran on? If someone ran on supporting human trafficking, you know, prosecutions in their community, and you help the community that supports human trafficking law enforcement officers, then that may be something that they would want to talk about in their campaign, and that's not a bad thing. That means that they want to be held accountable for supporting that group. So it's okay to look and see if someone's running for office in the recent future and what they might be running on.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Randy.
No, I was just going to say thanks again for the opportunity to present. And yeah, now we'll take any questions if there are any.
Sure. So, hi everyone. This is Laura again. Again, thank you so much to Kristen and Randy. Don't have any questions yet. I think in part because you guys have given us some really clear, concise, and practical tips of what everyone can do. But I'll give you all some time to type down in the Q&A box in the bottom right corner. Feel free to type your questions there, and I'll read them aloud to the presenters. So in the meantime, while we give everyone a couple minutes to do that, if they do have questions, I can tell you guys just a little bit more about the NITVAN program. And again, it stands for the National Identity Theft Victim Assistance Network. It's a grant program run by the Identity Theft Resource Center. And like I said earlier, we at the National Center for Victims of Crime are helping to provide some technical assistance for that program. Each year, a couple of identity theft coalitions are selected. We work with those coalitions to provide support and resources and help them basically get the coalitions off the ground in most cases, and then also think about sustainability and training and collaborating and coordination throughout the year. And one of the things that has come up a lot was the collaboration between service providers and nonprofit organizations and law enforcement. And it's really great that Kristen, who is leading one of the coalitions, and Randy, who's on the advisory board for NITVAN, were able to think up and form a really good collaboration, it sounds like, and then share that information with us. So we do, it looks like we do have a couple of questions. So one of our presenters asked about tribal police. Do you guys have any insight in working with tribal police?
Yeah, this is Randy. Regarding tribal police, I actually, when I stepped out of law enforcement, I actually became a security director for a casino. There was a tribal casino. So I worked there for almost a year and a half. What I can tell you about that, when it comes to tribal police, you should be able to contact the tribal police directly. They have their own command staff. They have their, usually you're going to have a police chief. They're going to have, you know, their rank structure just like any other agency. So you should be able to reach out directly to that tribal police agency to help them, to get them help. I know that one of the issues, though, I know dealing with NITVAN is the fact that obviously there is the information out there about how to help the tribal communities even more. And the tribal police obviously is a good way to start. I think you can get in with them pretty easily. And then from there, though, when it comes to tribal, obviously they have tribal councils just like any city council. And when you start talking about trying to get the information out to the actual members of the tribe, that's where you would have to go to more like the tribal councils. But the tribal police departments, you should be able to contact. And most of the tribal police that I've met and worked with over the years, they obviously have the same issues that any other law enforcement does. So they appreciate the help that you guys can give them.
All right, thank you so much, Randy. One more question. One of the attendees is asking about adult protective services and scams against the elderly when they don't have an identifiable perpetrator or where contact information leads to nowhere. Is there anything law enforcement can do beyond that point?
That's where, yeah, that's where having the information available to, I think just getting the information out there and available to them so they know where to try to, refer people to and things like that. I think that's really where it comes down to where the relationships and getting this information out to the agencies so that they have that information. Because some victims that are out there, obviously they look at the internet, they search, they find things on their own, but it's so much better when I think an agency can actually just provide that information to them. It's just so much nicer.
This is Kristen. I'll jump in too. What we're finding at the Cybercrime Support Network is exactly what you're talking about here in this question. I appreciate you bringing it up. We're modeling a program here in the U.S. that's already done in the U.K. where they have one number or one place to go to report cybercrime. They've given jurisdiction to one law enforcement agency there in the entire UK. We don't have that here yet. So what we're doing at CSN is we're working with law enforcement in each of the states as we move our pilot program to find out what responses are available. But I'll let you know that about 50% of the people that complain, and a lot of it may be these romance scams to the elderly or wire scams, lottery scams. Of the 50% of the people that report cybercrime in the UK, 50% of them, there is no law enforcement response. And that's really where our organization is coming in. Most of those folks, there's not going to be even a police report because the perpetrators may be in a foreign country far away that we don't cooperate with. But those victims still have needs. And what our fraudsupport.org website will be doing is making sure that the victims get to where they need to go and are able to report to one database on a national level. So you're absolutely right that a lot of times there may not be a law enforcement response, and that is because they can't find the perpetrator, and they never will. But those victims still have needs, and that's where our organization is trying to help them. And I know many of the law enforcement agencies, victim advocates, hotlines, there are good resources. It's just hard for people to find them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Kristen. And this is Laura. I'll share a little bit of information that I have. I'm hoping that Kristen's program is really innovative, and I'm really hopeful that that's something that gets off the ground and becomes something that it can be replicated on a national scale here in the U.S. Right now, I think the best places to report the FTC's Consumer Sentinel. They do take reports. The FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, sometimes known as the IC3. And then there's also the Better Business Bureau Scam Tracker. Unfortunately, what happens is of those reports, not all are going to be investigated. And in addition, individual ones usually aren't investigated. They gather them, they collect data, and sometimes, the FCC does use that data to determine which ones to investigate, and then does prosecutions based on those, but it's usually ones that are really high volume, like the IRS tax scam was something they did more investigation and were able to hold some perpetrators liable overseas because it was happening on such a large scale. It warranted attention. The reporting is important for data purposes, but like Kristen said, because there's so many different ways that it's collected, it's not that helpful for the individual person. As far as, and when you're dealing with an older adult, giving them multiple places to report makes things a little bit more difficult. But there are places that they can report. Reporting is important, and I do think when you're dealing with this type of crime, prevention from re-victimization is also really important. So doing whatever you can do to protect that person from falling into those same traps again, whether it's putting credit freezes on their accounts or getting some sort of software to monitor what they're doing, something like that. There's a lot of resources out there on the prevention side of things to ensure that hopefully they don't get re-victimized. Okay, one other question. Do you have any suggestions on how to increase engagement of domestic violence prevention with law enforcement? Many officers seem to see it as an endless cycle.
Yes, this is Randy. For that, obviously, domestic violence I can tell you police officers are trained on DV, domestic violence, on a regular basis. Prevention is tough. The law enforcement agencies are going out there, they're trying to investigate, they're trying to, solve the immediate issue, whatever that problem is at that point, and then obviously they're moving on. I think law enforcement as a whole is getting a lot better, at least in the law enforcement agencies that I've seen and worked with here, about trying to work more with prevention, meaning when you see a DV victim, law enforcement is being educated on the cycle of violence and how all that works. So consequently, now we're providing much more, a lot of law enforcement is providing a lot more information to the victims on where to go to get help. So obviously that's a very tough subject when it comes to trying to get more prevention out there to help. So yeah, it's a matter of, I think if you're in that realm, if you're in the realm of where you're doing DV prevention, that's where you really need to reach out, I think, to the law enforcement agency and specifically to the detectives, whether it be crimes of violence where they actually have domestic violence detectives, to make sure they know about that, your agency, and what you can do for the DV victims so that they can ensure that the victims are getting that information too. One thing I will add to, I've seen several statements come across to just about different specific issues, whether it be adult protective service scams or the fake computer virus scams, things like that. Those are all scams that are out there. What I will say is this: if you have some specific questions, I put my contact information in this presentation. So instead of trying to maybe go to talk about everything, if somebody has a specific question that you think that I might be able to help you with, feel free to give me a call.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Randy. If you could actually scroll back to slide 17 that has your contact info for people to jot down real quickly, that would be great. And yeah, with that, I think we'll let everyone go. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it. And this webinar was recorded and will be posted. So if you missed parts of the beginning and want to go back and rewatch it, we'll be sending those links out. And as long as we might be able to send the slides out too, just have to check with our presenters. But again, thanks for everyone for joining us, and hope to see you at a future webinar.
Thank you.